Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
This is a Federal News Network podcast.
Coming up today on the Federal Newscast, lawmakers look to expand incentives to retain Air Force pilots. The Pentagon launches a joint task force audit. And House lawmakers want to expand the PACT Act to cover federal employees. These stories and more on today's Federal Newscast. Welcome to the Federal Newscast. I'm Michelle Sandiford. A bipartisan group of lawmakers is seeking to expand both financial and non-monetary incentives to help the Air Force retain pilots and other in-demand airmen. A new bill dubbed the Retention Enhancements for Tactical Aircrew Initiative, or Retain Act, would require the Air Force to pay maximum aviation incentive pay, increase retention bonuses up to $100,000, and allow airmen to transition indefinitely to non-combat aviation career paths. Meanwhile, the Fighter Aircrew Career Flexibility Act would allow service members to take a one-time break from active duty, lasting 4 months to 1 year. The measure would also allow aviators to spend time in the civilian workforce and return to active duty afterward. The Pentagon has launched the Joint Task Force Audit, bringing together service members, civilians, and industry experts to help the comptroller target problem areas identified in audits across the departments. Federal News Network's Anastasia Obis has more.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth tasked Jay Hurst, who's performing the duties of the Pentagon Comptroller, to lead the initiative and manage the priorities of the task force. Hegseth said the Office of the Inspector General will bring in a major accounting firm to serve as the department's group auditor.
We're ending the wasteful process of agency-by-agency opinions and slashing the number of disjointed, separate audits by 2/3.
The initiative will also rely in part on artificial intelligence and automation to identify and resolve persistent financial vulnerabilities. Anastasia Obis, Federal News Network.
House lawmakers want to expand the PACT Act to cover civilian federal employees on top of veterans. In 2022, the PACT Act secured health benefits for veterans exposed to toxic burn pits during their service. But civilian employees who face the same exposure are not covered to the same extent. A new bill would ensure benefits for civilians like law enforcement officers and national security personnel who are also facing toxin-related illnesses. A new watchdog report provides new details on how Department of Government Efficiency staffers gained access to Treasury Department payment systems. Federal News Network's Justin Doubleday has more.
The Treasury Department didn't follow key IT security protocols when DOJ staffers gained access to Bureau of Fiscal Service payment systems last year. That's according to a new Government Accountability Office report. GAO found Treasury didn't configure its security tools to identify and block unencrypted payment information, resulting in a DOJ employee improperly sending that data outside the Bureau. Treasury also didn't hold the DOJ staffer accountable for following IT security rules before issuing them a laptop. Treasury agreed with GAO's recommendations to shore up its data protection controls. Justin Doubleday, Federal News Network.
Agency Freedom of Information Act offices have a new toolkit to help them with FOIA hiring. The recruiting guides were released by the Chief FOIA Officers Council's Committee on Cross-Agency Collaboration and Innovation. The toolkit helps offices with qualifications, interview questions, scoring methods, position descriptions, and more. It comes as agencies consistently report FOIA staffing issues. Many agency FOIA offices lost staff last year, even as request backlogs soared to new heights. Employees at the Environmental Protection Agency are filing allegations of agency retaliation. Federal News Network's Drew Friedman has more.
Those allegations come from dozens of EPA employees who were suspended last year after signing a declaration of dissent against EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin. Their complaints, which were filed at the Office of Special Counsel, argue that the 2-week suspensions violate their First Amendment rights and federal whistleblower protections. Attorneys representing the employees have already submitted 15 complaints and say that many more are on the way. Drew Friedman, Federal News Network.
You can find these stories and more on our website, federalnewsnetwork.com. And you can subscribe to the Federal Newscast along with the Federal Drive with Terry Gerton wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Michelle Sandiford.
Sean O'Keefe, former Navy Secretary, NASA Administrator, and senior leader across multiple presidential administrations, reflects on the principles that shaped his long federal career. In this episode of Lessons in Leadership, he joined Shane Canfield, CEO of WEPA, to discuss motivating teams through uncertainty, leading across agencies, and staying rooted in mission during times of public scrutiny and change.
Hello, and welcome to the Lessons in Leadership podcast. I'm your host, Shane Canfield, CEO of WEPA. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Sean O'Keefe, former NASA Administrator, former Deputy Director of the Office of Management and Budget, former Secretary of the Navy, former Comptroller and CFO of the Defense Department, and Professor Emeritus at Syracuse University's Maxwell School of Public Affairs. Welcome, and thank you for joining.
Well, thank you, Shane. Delight to be with you. Appreciate it very much.
What first drew you into public service, and when was it evident to you that leadership was an important part of the roles you played?
Well, I grew up around the public service. My dad was a career naval officer. He was a submariner, and we lived all over the place throughout the country. And as a result, I got an up-close and personal understanding through him, as well as through all the folks he associated with and the environments he was working in, just what the extraordinary value is of public service and what is it that would motivate people to want to be engaged in it and to be really involving themselves in what is something larger than themselves. And the only place that is really formulated properly is within the public sector and the public service. That again is the beneficiary or the beneficiaries are the citizens of the nation, the community, and the region in which you live.
Did you think about leadership early on, saying I need to be a great leader and therefore I'm going to learn how to do it, or did you just naturally evolve into it? Any thoughts on that?
I guess it evolved by the great good fortune of being witness to several really extraordinary leaders, people who really did take the initiative to engage others in the task, to pull together and motivate folks to really contribute their very best to achieve an outcome. And I saw the value of that on multiple occasions and found that was the primary ingredient, the trait, the characteristic that needed to be exhibited is the fundamentals of leadership in moving everyone engaged towards a common objective.
You have served under several presidents. Can you talk a little bit about that? What were there challenges to overcome, or were you away from politics so you didn't get? Talk about that a little bit. How does it differ as you serve through a transition, or does leadership stay the same?
Oh no, it's it's really critically important in transition cases, to be sure. But the two presidents that I served in their administrations were President George H.W. Bush and President George W. Bush in two different eras, obviously. But as a consequence, that was the closest I came to understanding the nature of the individuals who were in that ultimate leadership capacity, and their capability to motivate. Both of them were just extraordinarily inspiring people who motivated everybody to be part of the solution. But most importantly, they also had a capacity of really designating what needed to be done, and you knew that they were perfectly prepared to do it themselves. And that made the task that much more achievable. There were several different circumstances, and understanding what the objectives of the senior leadership are all about.
You've worked for different kinds of organizations, political administrations, and then government departments, agencies, and then private sector, and now academia. How does that affect your leadership style? Or do you find that leadership, the core tenets of leadership, are applicable no matter what the organization you find yourself in and having to lead? It doesn't matter where you are, that the core leadership characteristics are the same? Are they different? Are you adapting?
Well, there's a common myth in my judgment, and I'm probably the minority view of this in the academic field of public management. That common myth is that you can't apply the same principles in the public sector that you do in the private sector.
Yeah.
I never found that to be an impediment.
Okay.
It was always a circumstance where, strategy, the focus on the talent, people engaged, the process to going through decision making, the integrity imperative that must be there in order to demonstrate the absolute conviction of what's intended here, as well as the moral standing of what it is you're attempting to achieve. All those factors are very much the same. It's going to have its nuances, and there are very distinctive, differentiators within those organizations and those sectors. But at the same time, those basic principles, those tenets, foundations of what make up organizations and organization theory, in so many ways are fundamentally the same. And how you employ those may be slightly nuanced to match the condition, but they all are imperative in the same direction.
A little bit of a different direction. You were part of the very first cohort of what is now Presidential Management Intern Program, later became the Presidential Management Fellows Program. What did that early experience teach you about leading within government?
The Presidential Management Intern Program, as it started, was designed for just that purpose: a focus on public management, a focus on implementation. And its evolution over time has been extraordinary. It mystifies me why that has been the subject now of an executive order that has dismantled it. And it's absolutely unconscionable, given the nature of the hundreds, thousands of people who've moved through that program in the course of the last nearly 50 years, that have gone on in some cases to be senior executives within the federal government, and in other cases, they've moved on to other kinds of pursuits. But even with that, even for those who have left the service, they walked away with an appreciation of what public service is all about, why it matters, and why this is so critical to get it right. Because by and large, the reason why these functions are delegated to the public sector is because no one else can do it. Usually that's the case. It takes that kind of focus of a public entity in order to achieve an outcome that frankly would not be achieved in other spheres. So as a result of that, it gave me an incredibly in-depth understanding of that process at a very early stage in my career that has lasted the entirety of that professional experience.
A closing question. Who has influenced your leadership style, and what about their example stays with you? And that question can be cast broadly. So, inside government, outside government, perhaps not government at all, somebody that you've met, reported to, been mentored by, a broad net. But when you think about broadly, when you think about who has influenced you, who comes to mind?
I would have to say that the number one, hands down, greatest influence during the course of my life was my dad. He was an engineer, so everything was a calculated risk. I think I was probably 25 before I realized the answer was not to be found for everything in a slide rule, but that was his bent and his mindset. And he taught me how to think critically. And it really was one of the most extraordinary attributes. And he was an inspiring parent and mentor in so many ways. And all the different things I've done throughout the course of his life, I had the opportunity through much of it to be able to consult with him on a variety of things, and always walked away with a more informed perspective. Dad was an extraordinary public servant in his own right.
Well, Sean, thank you very much for sharing your insights and experiences. It has been a pleasure talking.
I'm delighted to be with you, Shane. Thank you so much for doing this.
And this is Shane Canfield, CEO of WEPA, reminding you to empower your team and embrace challenges. Until the next time on Lessons in Leadership.
Find the full podcast and future episodes of Lessons in Leadership on the Federal News Network app and anywhere you enjoy your podcasts.